Hey everybody, this is User Psycholepsy. I'm here to try and illustrate a scenario. We've got this case where Silver Nostros has an idea, and I just want to see if it passes your scrutiny. The question he's asking is, if you have a simulation of a cliff and one person jumps down in a base jump simulation while the other stays behind, the holodeck has to create different gravities. Free fall de facto is weightlessness. And that's kind of true. If you got one guy who's staying on a cliff and another one who's falling, it would seem that different gravities are taking place because one person isn't moving and one person is experiencing weightlessness. But I'm here to say that we don't need to manipulate gravity to get this simulation going, and we can use it with a lot less resources that the holodeck already has. This is a scenario that I like to call the holodeck. And I'm recording this kind of off, so I'm sorry about that weird stuff at work. It makes it impossible to show really cool stuff. But eventually the word holodeck is going to appear just like it did. And we're going to go to our scenario where we have Lieutenant Stayer and Lieutenant Jumper. And they're just chilling. They're going to volunteer for us today. Any second now, Lieutenant Jumper is going to jump off her position. And when she does so... there she goes. We're going to pause the simulation, and we're going to talk about what happens here. She is just below him, and there's going to be this line between them. It's called the wall of perception. Now we know the wall of perception isn't exactly the most technical term here, so we can get rid of that, and we're going to call it the perceptual terminator. Basically, it's a force field that exists between her and him as she falls, and from his perspective, he's looking down onto a screen that renders her falling. If she were to look up, she would be looking up into a screen that renders him rising above and away from her. The relative distance between them doesn't change here, but their perceptual distance makes it appear that they are indeed moving further away from each other. So... she's falling, and again, I'm waiting for the visual here to catch up to the narration. But she's falling on this air cushion that's holding her in place while there's air rushing up around her. Now, this air is being caught by the force field that exists between her and Lieutenant Stayer, so he doesn't feel air rushing around him. But she can maintain weightlessness and get the perspective that she's actually falling. He is looking down and he's seeing that she's falling away. If she were to look up, he would appear to be rising away from her. Again, for her, the scenery gets to change, but Lieutenant Stayer remains blissfully unaware of this change. Eventually, she is going to hit the holodeck floor when she lands, and we're going to get some of that there. But, he's still seeing that she's falling, and she's looking up, and he's still rising up and away from her. So now... the second half of the thing that Silver Nostril says is, the jumper decides to climb up the cliff once they land. At some point, both meet, and the climber has to be below the person that stayed behind. That means the person that stayed behind has to be moved up, and the gravity of the person has to be reduced to the tune of canceling out the acceleration of that upwards movement. So, in this scenario, the person who programmed my base jumping simulation required them to have to climb up to a point above the holodeck floor that would be safe enough for him to remain elevated and her to move below him at the very beginning. So that sort of renders that first part kind of neutral. They wouldn't be on the floor when she went to jump. So no gravity manipulation there. But there is a curious thing that can happen. Because, he has seen her fall, and if her current position renders her on the floor of the holodeck, then she appears to be far below him on the place that she landed. We'll just assume, at the base of this mountain. So if she's on the holodeck floor, she's looking up, and he's way up there, and she starts climbing. she is going to need to climb pretty fast to pass through this perceptual terminator, because her apparent position to him is far below where she actually is. She's sort of cloaked by the perceptual terminator, her actual position, that is. So when she starts climbing, she's going to pass from his position, apparently through the holodeck floor, which to him just looks like open space. And she's going to climb, and once she climbs and rises to her current position in the video, that perceptual filter between them is not going to be necessary anymore. And again, I'm sorry, I'm waiting for the action to catch up to the narration, because I'm doing this at work and I've got crappy editing stuff here. So as she climbs, she passes through the apparent holodeck floor. The scenery moves around her until such a point where she is now relative to him, and her apparent position and real position are the same. So that perceptual filter between them can go away, even though she's only inches off the floor. So I hope that makes sense to you all. And yeah, let me know if there's questions, concerns. I'm sure you will. Daystrom Institute is wonderful. But this is Psycholepsy signing off. Thanks.